Hello and welcome to Shikara Academy's UPSC Mains PYQ series. In this PYQ series, in these sessions, we are discussing all the GS mains questions asked by UPSC over the past years. In today's session, we will be discussing the 2023 GS paper 2, starting from question number 11 to question number 15. So let's begin with question 1, first question for the day, that is question number 11. The Constitution of India is a living instrument with capabilities of enormous dynamism. It is a constitution made for a progressive society. So this is an introductory statement that is given in the question. When such introductory statements are given in the question, we have to deal with them in the introduction of the answer itself. Okay. Now we have to illustrate with special reference to the expanding horizons of the right to life and personal liberty. We have to illustrate the statement, or we have to support this statement by giving the examples, by expanding the horizon, including the right to life as well as personal liberty. Okay, how this statement that constitution is a living instrument and is made for a progressive society, how it is, how this statement is correct with respect to the right to life and personal liberty. So it is a 15-mark question that we have to answer in 250 words. Mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of polity as well as constitution, polity and constitution, and the topic is Indian Constitution, that is the significant provisions of the Indian Constitution. Okay, the significant provisions of the Constitution. Now, the approach that we'll be taking in answering such a question is that in introduction, we describe the Constitution as a living document. That is, we deal with the introductory statement that was given in the question. Then in body, we address the demand of the question by writing the expanding horizons of the Article 21 and further substantiating by writing the Constitution as a progressive document. Then in conclusion, we will be summarizing the answer that we have written. Starting with the introduction. So the Constitution of India is not a static legal document, but a dynamic framework that adapts to the evolving needs of society. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar envisioned it as a flexible and progressive charter capable of guiding India through social, political, and economic transformation. Now, whenever the question asks about some of the particular provisions of the Constitution, or the a broad topic of Constitution is asked, it is always a good practice to highlight Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's name. Okay, to include Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in your answer and to particularly highlight that point that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has made regarding that particular provision or regarding the Constitution as a whole. So this dynamism is most evident in the judicial interpretation of Article 21, which is the right to life and personal liberty. Now, this is the connecting statement through which, the connecting line through which we have connected the introduction of the answer with the body of the answer. So starting with body, so first is the expanding horizons of Article 21, how the interpretation of the Article 21 has broadened over the years. So Article 21 originally guaranteed that no person shall be deprived of life or personal liberty, except according to the procedure that is established by the law. Over the time, over the course of 75 years, since the Constitution has come into picture, the judicial pronouncements has the judicial interpretation as well as the pronouncements have expanded its scope significantly. So the judiciary has expanded the scope of Article 21, that is right to life and personal liberty. It has expanded the scope as well as the horizon of this entire article. So first such case is the right to life with dignity, that was under the Menaka Gandhi versus Union of India case in 1978. It redefined Article 21 to include dignity, fairness, and reasonableness in the article, or in the right to, in the fundamental right to liberty. Uh, then there is the right to privacy, the second right, that was recognized as a fundamental right in the KS Puttaswamy versus Union of India case of 2017. Third is the right to livelihood, that was recognized under the Olga Telis versus the Bombay Municipal Corporation case of 1985, which held livelihood as an integral to the life. It is an integral part of the right to life. Then the fourth such right is that right to health and clean environment. This was highlighted in the Parmanand Katara versus the Union of India 1989. It mandated emergency medical care, and the MC Mehta case also expanded it to include the pollution-free environment, especially regarding the air pollution. Then there comes the right to education. In Mohini Jain case of 1992 and Unni Krishnan case of 1993 led to the insertion of Article 21A in the Constitution through the 86th Amendment Act of 2002. And Article 21A states about the right to education. Then finally, we have the right to die with dignity. That was in Common Cause versus Union of India case 2018. It recognized passive euthanasia and the living wills of the individual. Now, substantiating our points by writing Constitution as a progressive document. So we can write that the Constitution ensures adaptability through judicial creativity and constitutional amendments. Okay, the judicial interpretations as well as the constitutional amendments has been occurring over the past 75 years, and this has ensured adaptability of the constitution and has make sure that the constitution remains a progressive document. It is not that much rigid. Now, this being a progressive document, so it balances individual liberty with the collective welfare. So this flexibility or this adaptability is uh, done so that it makes sure the individual liberty, it has to balance the individual liberty with the collective welfare. So that is why the constitution has to adapt to the changing times. Then finally, it provides a framework to address the emerging challenges like the data protection, environmental sustainability, and healthcare rights. So it has to evolve continuously so that it can provide a framework to the emerging challenges of the to the country or to the mankind as a whole. That is like the data protection. So when the constitution was promulgated or when it was written, this data protection was not as there was no such thing called the data protection. The internet was not there. Okay. Then environmental sustainability. Over the last few decades, there has been concerns about the sustainability of the environment. So we have the sustainability development goals and the healthcare rights that the people have realized after the COVID-19 pandemic. So in conclusion, we can summarize the answer by writing that Indian Constitution is rightly called a living instrument as it evolves with changing times. Why we call it the Constitution as a living document? Because it evolves with the changing times, while it upholds its core democratic values. Even though it is evolving, it upholds the main core democratic values, which makes the foundation of the Constitution. The judicial expansion to the right of life and personal liberty illustrates its progressive nature, making it a true guardian of human dignity in the modern society. Moving on to the next question, that is question number 12. Explain the constitutional perspectives of gender justice with the help of relevant constitutional provisions and case laws. A 15-mark question that we have to answer in 250 words. Quite a direct question that has been asked from the topic Indian Constitution, that is its significant provisions of the Indian Constitution. Now, the approach that we'll be taking in answering such a question is that in introduction, we describe the gender justice because the question is talking about gender justice. So we describe the gender justice in the introduction. Then in body, we address the demand of the question by writing the constitutional provisions for the gender justice and the judicial interpretation and case laws that are also associated with the gender justice in India. Then in conclusion, we summarize the answer. So starting with the introduction, gender justice refers to the fair treatment of individuals irrespective of gender and ensuring equality, dignity and opportunities for all the genders. The Indian Constitution, as a transformative document, provides a robust framework to eliminate gender based discrimination and empower women. And the judicial interpretation has further strengthened these guarantees. Now, these constitution provisions for the gender justice, which constitution provisions are there in the Constitution which supports the cause of gender justice in the country? So, first is the preamble. So, preamble promotes justice, equality, dignity of an individual, of all the individuals in the country. Then there are fundamental rights, particularly Article 14, that is equality before law and equal protection of the law. Article 15, 1 and 2, it prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. And Article 15.3 permits affirmative action for the women as well as children. Then we have Article 16, which provides equal opportunity in the public employment, irrespective of the gender. Then in Article 21, there is right to life with dignity, and it extended to the reproductive rights of women as well as protection against the sexual harassment for the women gender or the female gender. Then we have the directive principles of state policies that talks about the gender justice, including Article 39A, that is equal right to livelihood, equal right to all the genders. Article 39D, equal pay for equal work irrespective of the gender. And Article 42, just and human conditions of work and the concept of maternity leave. Then the fundamental duties, that is Article 51A, point E, uh, the entry E, it says that we have the duty to renounce the practices that are derogatory to women. So that means if we renounce the practices that are derogatory to women, so that leads to overall gender justice in the society. Now the judicial cases uh, and the case laws which further substantiate our uh, idea of the gender, or which further substantiate the idea of gender justice, or which further pushes the idea of gender justice in Indian society. So these cases are: first is Air India versus Nargesh Mirza, case of 1981. It struck down discriminatory service rules for the air hostesses. Then we have Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan 1997, which laid down the guidelines against the workplace sexual harassment, and we commonly call them as the Vishakha guidelines. Then it is the Shaira Bano versus Union of India 2017 case. This particular case declared the instant triple talaq as unconstitutional. Then we have Joseph Shine versus Union of India 2018, which decriminalized the adultery as well as upholding the gender equality. Then recently we also have the case of Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India, which expanded the gender justice to sexual orientation as well as dignity. So these five are the cases which further push the idea of gender equality or the gender justice in the society. So in conclusion, we can summarize our answer by writing: the Indian Constitution envisions gender justice as an essential component of social transformation. Okay. Though through a combination of constitutional provisions and progressive judicial interpretation. So both the constitution provisions as well as the progressive judicial interpretation, the constitution ensures equality, it safeguards dignity and promotes empowerment of women, thereby and the other genders, the third gender, thereby moving towards a more inclusive and just society. So, when the question is asking about the gender equality or the gender justice, please do not limit your answer to women only. Try to incorporate the third gender also in your answer. Moving on to the next question, that is question number 13. Account for the legal and political factors responsible for reduced frequency of using Article 356 by the union governments since the mid 1990s. Okay. So a 15-mark question that we have to answer in 100, 250 words. So it is a question about the Article 356, that is the president's rule in the different states of India. So earlier what used to happen is that whenever the government in the center changes, so regardless of the party, so it used to dissolve all the state assemblies or all the in which the opposition parties were ruling. Okay. By so the central government used the Article 356 in doing so. But in the 1990s, due to the Supreme Court intervention, especially in the SR Bomai case, okay, after that case, this practice of frequent use of Article 356 to bring down the governments of the state in the states of the opposition party, this issue has been solved more or less. Now, mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that the question has been asked from the subject of polity, and it is a topic on the federalism, that is issues and challenges pertaining to the federal structure. So, our Article 356 is a topic that highlights the, or is a topic, or is a sub part of the federal structure topic. that is the center-state relations. Now, the approach that we'll be taking in answering such a question is that in introduction, we describe the Article 356 because the question is focusing on Article 356. In the body, we write the legal factors that are responsible for the less frequent use of Article 356, and then we write the political factors also that has also contributed to the less use or the less frequent use of the Article 356. Then, in conclusion, we will be summarizing the answer. So, starting with the introduction, Article 356 of the Indian Constitution empowers the Union government to impose president's rule in a state in case of failure of constitutional machinery. However, its frequent misuse, particularly from 1960s to 1980s, to dismiss opposition-ruled state governments undermined the federalism in the country. And since the mid 1990s, its usage has declined considerably due to judicial, legal, as well as political developments in the country. So, what are the legal factors? Okay, the judicial factors that led to the uh, decline in the use of the Article 356. So, first, the most important is the SR Bomai versus Union of India case, 1994. It was a landmark judgment that restricted the arbitrary use of Article 356. It made the presidential proclamation subject to the judicial review and directed that the floor test in the assembly is the proper method to test the majority of the government of the party in power in the state. Then there is judicial vigilance. So subsequent rulings reinforced federal spirit and discouraged central from misusing the Article 356. Most recent case, we can say, of Uttarakhand Assembly in 2016. Okay. Then there is the idea of constitutional morality because strengthening of the constitutional conventions made the center more cautious in dismissing the state governments. Then there are some certain other political factors that also contributed to this trend. Most important being the era of coalition governments from the 1990s, okay, till 2014 and now in 2024. Okay, India has seen at the center, at the union government, we have seen about the era of the coalition governments. So from 1990s, no single party dominated the center for long, and the coalition politics it encouraged the consensus as well as cooperation with the states because no single party was powerful enough in the center to dictate terms to the state governments or the parties that were ruling in the state. Then there are rise of regional parties. So there are strong regional parties became crucial for national coalition governments, reducing the incentives for arbitrarily dismissing them. Then there is federal maturity. Increasing acceptance of federalism as a political reality reduced the confrontation between the center as well as the states. Then there was judicial and public scrutiny. The growing media attention, particularly in the era of social media also, and the public awareness discouraged political motivated dismissals. So, in conclusion, we summarize the answer by writing the decline in misuse of Article 356 reflects the maturing of the Indian democracy. Okay. So, this point highlights that the Indian democracy, with every passing decade, with every passing year, it is getting more and more mature. Okay. The democracy is getting mature in the country. The judicial safeguards, the coalition politics, and the rise of regional parties. These three are the biggest factors that have together strengthened the federal balance in the country. Today, Article 356 is seen as a measure of last resort, not as a political weapon, and this showcases or this highlights India's evolving constitutionalism. Okay. Moving on to the next question, that is question number 14. Discuss the contribution of civil society groups for women's effective and meaningful participation and representation in state legislatures in the country or in India. So it is a 15-mark question that we have to answer in 250 words. Mapping it with the syllabus, so it comes either it is a topic that has been asked from the subject of polity, it is an overlapping question from the subject of polity as well as social justice. So it is talking about the role of civil society, how the civil society has led to the women empowerment and women's effective role and effective and meaningful participation in the representation in the state legislatures. Okay, this is not asking about the women's representation at the center, okay, or in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha in the parliament. It is asking about the women's representation in the state legislatures. So the approach that we'll be taking in answering such a question, like we give a contextual introduction about the civic society, about the civil society, about the participation of women in the state legislatures. Then in body, we mainly address the demand of the questions by writing the contributions of civil society groups in in, in enhancing the further effective participation of women in the state legislatures. And then in conclusion, we will be summarizing the answer. So starting with the introduction. So women's participation in state legislatures in India remains low despite constitutional guarantees of equality. Okay. So the constitution lays no discrimination, or constitution or the uh, other legal documents, they do not discriminate against the women's participation in the legislatures in the country. But it has been seen that women's participation both at the center as well as the state is low, but this is particularly more low in case of the state legislatures out there. Okay, when we compare the women's participation in in the parliament or in the state legislature, the situation is more dire in the, or more poor in the state legislatures. So the civil society groups, including the NGOs, women movements, as well as advocacy networks, have played a crucial role in bridging the gap by promoting awareness, capacity building, as well as policy advocacy. And how they have done this? So they have done this by awareness and advocacy. Okay, what are their contributions? So that is the campaigns highlighting the need for greater representation of the women in legislatures, and the particular advocacy for the women's reservation bill. That is one third reservation in legislatures, both at the center as well as at the state legislatures. Then the public debates and mobilizations to change the societal attitudes towards the women leaders. Then there is capacity building and leadership training. See, organizations like SEVA, that is Self-Employed Women's Association, and Mahila Samakhya empower women through the political education. Okay, so firstly, they raise the awareness, these civic society groups. Secondly, they are involved in capacity building and leadership training in the women. So they undertake the training programs in leadership, public speaking, and governance, and equip women to contest elections effectively. Then there is grassroots mobilization. The civil society networks mobilize women at the community level to demand the representation. The Panchayati Raj reservation, that is the 33% that has been mandated by the 73rd as well as the 74th Amendment. Okay, both at the Panchayati Raj institutions as well as the in the urban local bodies. They provide a model for the grassroots empowerment sustained by these civil society organizations' support. Then there is monitoring and accountability. The civil society groups, they track women's representation and publish reports, creating pressure on the political parties. And they campaign. Okay, these civil society groups, these civil society organizations, NGOs, they campaign for gender sensitive policies as well as accountability in the state legislatures. Finally, they are involved. These civil society groups or the organizations, they are involved in collaboration with the political parties. They undergo collaboration with the political parties. The civil society engages parties to ensure more women candidates, and initiatives like the women manifestos influence party agendas to include gender justice issues, because the political parties they have also started to realize that the 50% constituency or the 50% of the vote bank is the women vote bank, or is the women votes. So they are also now entering collaboration with these civil society groups to further boost the participation of the women in the state legislatures as and also at the central in the parliament. Then, in conclusion, we summarize the answer by writing: civil society has been instrumental in transforming women from passive voters to active legislators. So, civil society has transformed, or it is trying to transform, women from being passive voters to active legislators, and by creating awareness, building leadership, and advocating for systemic reforms, these civil society groups, have paved the way for effective and meaningful participation of women in state legislatures, and overall, thus strengthening India's democracy and social justice framework. So now, if more and more women participate in the state legislatures, more and more women participate in the parliament, that strengthens the democratic fabric in the country and also further strengthens or boosts the social justice framework or narrative in the country. Then moving on to the last question for today's discussion, that is question number 15. Explain the significance of 101st Constitution Amendment Act. To what extent does it reflect the accommodative spirit of federalism? A 15-mark question that we have to answer in 250 words. Okay. It is a topic on the center and state relations. So it is particularly catering to the issues and challenges pertaining to the federal structure. Seeing the approach, so in introduction, we describe the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, because the question is talking about the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. So whenever the emphasis is given on a particular thing in the question, it is a good practice to deal with that in the introduction of the question itself, in the introduction of the answer itself. Then in body, we address the demand of the question by writing the key significance of this 101st Constitutional Amendment Act, as well as how this act is reflecting or is a reflection of the accommodative spirit of federalism in the country. Then, in conclusion, we summarize the answer. So, starting with the introduction, the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act, passed in 2016, it introduced the Goods and Services Tax (GST) in India and was effective from July 1st, 2017. Now, this particular act, it subsumed, or this GST subsumed multiple indirect taxes into a single unified tax system, creating one nation, one tax, one market. And it is a landmark reform in India's fiscal architecture. Now we have to describe the key significance of the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. So first is the simplification of the tax structure. So this amendment, it replaced a complex system of central and state indirect taxes with the one tax, that is GST. Then it also reduced the cascading effects of taxes, that is tax that was being uh, that was being applied on tax only. Okay, so it reduced the burden, the cascading effect of the tax, as well as it replaced the complex system of central and indirect and state indirect taxes into a single unified tax system. Then it led to creation of a common market. This amendment removed the barriers of interstate trade, and it promoted ease of doing business and economic integration. Then it provided a boost to the fiscal federalism in the country. So both the union government as well as the state governments were empowered to levy as well as collect GST. That is the dual GST model. So we have the center GST. We also have the state GST. Okay. Then there is revenue efficiency. This amendment, it widened the tax base, and it improved compliance through IT-enabled GST network. So it first thing is that so the overall revenue of the government has gone up because the tax base has increased and the compliance is also very effective. Then it ensured higher revenues for the development expenditure. Finally, there are consumer as well as business benefits. So for consumers and businesses, it reduced the overall tax burdens on consumers, and it enhanced competitiveness of Indian goods as well and services at globally. So it further contributed to the ease of doing business in the country. Now, how it reflects the accommodative federalism in the country. So first is the cooperative structure. So the amendment has set up under amendment, this GST council has been set up. It is a unique federal body. It includes the union as well as the state government representatives. And its decisions are taken by consensus, showcasing dialogue as well as accommodation. Then there are shared taxation powers. So both center and states, they jointly administer the GST. Okay, both the central government as well as the state governments jointly administer GST, unlike the earlier tax division. So in earlier tax division, the excise was administered by the central government. The VAT was administered by the state governments, and there was a there were many of the complex. The sales tax was also uh, administered by the state government. So different taxes were being administered by the different indirect taxes were being administered by the different governments. So now the GST or the Amendment Act, 101st Amendment Act, it has led to the shared taxation powers between both the center as well as the state governments. Then it has the scope for the compensation mechanism. The center ensured compensation to states for revenue losses for the first 5 years. So, starting from 1st July 2017, when the GST was implemented, or the GST era started, till 30th June 2022. Now, in the first 5 years, any loss of revenue to the states by the implementation of GST when compared to their previous collections in the old regime, in the old indirect tax regime, that particular revenue loss, it was agreed that the central government will provide the compensation. And the central government also came out with the compensation cess that was applied or on the different sin goods like tobacco, cigarettes, as well as the luxury goods like the luxury SUV cars uh, and the aerated drinks on such products. So the central government started levying the compensation cess, and that compensation cess that was collected was then given to the states as the compensation for the first 5 years. Then there are balancing interests. So differential tax rates for essential as well as luxury goods reflect the consensus building. So there are earlier there were multiple slabs, but now the GST 2.0 under GST 2.0, the slabs have been simplified. Now we just have two slabs, that is the 5% slab as well as the 18% slab. The 12% and the 28% slabs have now been removed with effect from 22nd September, and the compensation cess has also been removed. Now, on the sin or the luxury goods, there will be a uniform tax of 40%. So, in conclusion, we can summarize the answer by writing the 101st Amendment is significant not only for economic reforms but also as an example of federal accommodation in practice. Through the GST Council, it institutionalized the cooperative federalism, balancing national integration with state autonomy, thereby strengthening India's federal democratic structure. Now, the PDF of these model answers will be available to you on Shikara Academy's Telegram channel. Thank you.